There are so many VR games on the Quest store that it can sometimes be difficult to find the best ones between them. So we are going to be talking about the 30 very best Quest 3 games that you have to play, so that next time when you turn on your headset, you know you're in for a good ride. So let's start off with the first one being Asgard's Wrath 2. This is an epic RPG with over 100 hours of questing, looting, and fighting some big bosses, making it pretty much the greatest example that if you have a Quest headset, that you play this game by default. Because not only does it have a deeply satisfying adventure you will dive into, it easily surpasses almost every VR game that came before it, making these technical achievements only possible since it is such a big budget title from the Oculus studios themselves. And that leads to the high level of quality and attention to detail that sets a consistent high bar for all other Quest 3 games. So if you've always wanted a deep VR RPG with some insane combat as well as exploration and a grand overall story, then this game is perfect for you. Which gets us to the second title, which is Assassin's Creed Nexus. This game is based on the well-established franchise where you will be embodying multiple of its former protagonists, with their stories being told as part of an interconnected campaign mode that is more or less on par with their flat-screen games. But the best part is that their signature mechanics are translating so well into virtual reality, with some awesome stealth missions and parkouring throughout its extensive levels, making you truly feel like you're part of this game world. And to number 3, we have Blade and Sorcery Nomad, with this being the Quest version of the original PC VR game, where you as the player will be stepping into a medieval fantasy sandbox, which is perfect if you love some hyper-realistic combat, where you can use blunt weapons as well as shoot arrows and cast magic. But what makes this game so good is its highly realistic, physics-driven interactions. These are even so detailed that objects actually have a certain weight to it and follow the laws of physics as they would in reality. But the craziest part is known as their Crystal Hunt update, because this will add a complete campaign mode to the game that will turn it from a sandbox to a story-based adventure. And while the PC VR version got access to this earlier, the Blade and Sorcery Nomad will get the same treatment with just slightly lower graphics. But overall, it is probably one of the most immersive and realistic games when it comes to a medieval settings and combat. So if you've always wanted to become a powerful warrior or maybe an insane sorcerer, then this is definitely for you. And on number 4, we have Batman Arkham Shadows. This is the true first big Batman VR game for the standalone headsets. And the reason why this is such a big deal is because just like Asgard's Wrath 2 in the past, it is now also bundled in when you get a Quest 3S or original Quest 3, with the game following the story from within Gotham City that is now under attack by the mysterious Rat King, and where it is up to you as Batman yourself to prevent this so-called Day of Wrath before it all goes wrong. And with loads of gadgets at your disposal and cool weapons for you to try out, you can also just bluntly use your fist and punch your way around it. And with this game, I just hope that more big names in gaming will follow the same footsteps like Batman Arkham Shadow, so that maybe one day we can finally get some AAA virtual reality games. And on number 5, we have Resident Evil 4 VR. This classic survival horror game is unlike anything else in its series, but unlike the Resident Evil 4 remake it received, this one luckily didn't change any significant events from the game, and instead it translates the original title near perfectly to virtual reality, where you can use full motion controllers and dual wield weapons while you interact with all the puzzles, doors, and cracks with both your hands in the game, which really shows that the developers went all out and not just went in to make a quick and easy copy. And while perhaps some elements, like the use of virtual cutscenes, are less than ideal, the overall gameplay more than makes up for it. And on number 6, we have Metal HELLSINGER, and this is probably easiest described as a first-person shooter with some badass weapons and some heavy metal music, where your main goal is to slay some demons on the rhythms of some awesome tunes. And all of that while you go through the 8 levels of hell trying to get your way out of it. And this game can get quite intense, especially for those who like to have a bit of a challenge. You can up it all the way to Archdevil difficulty. But overall, it is the intense gameplay together with its amazing music that really make the story that is about revenge come to life in front of your eyes. Even more so thanks to the award-winning actors that are telling the story about the protagonist. So if you love yourself a challenge and also enjoy some metal music while completely destroying demons on his well-timed beats, then Metal Hellsinger VR is the game for you. Which gets us to number 7, which is Metro Awakening. This is a story-driven first-person adventure built exclusively from the ground up for VR and with a big dark twist in its story, where the game takes place in the future of 2028. And in this leftover civilization, you will be embodying a doctor who is in search for his wife and the medication that she so desperately needs. But as you courage to your sanity and are pushed to your absolute limits, you will soon start to lose yourself in what can only be called a supernatural experience. But this game is not for the faint of heart, because while you might be able to protect yourself with some handmade weapons and your gas mask, as you venture deeper into the depths of Metro, you'll come across more than just some desperate bandits. And while most gameplay that you see on screen right now should be considered as beta footage, the game still looks absolutely stunning in virtual reality, maybe even too good when it comes to the real scary parts. But if you want to play a more relaxed game, then number 8, which is Demeo, might be a good option too, especially if you love board games or Dungeons and Dragons, because here you will just pick a class and tackle a randomly generated dungeon. But it is thanks to the game's punishing difficulty that it means that sessions can last anywhere from a couple minutes to multiple hours. And thanks to its big free updates that provided complete new campaigns to the game, as well as a mixed reality support, it quickly became one of the most popular games for the Quest 3 headset. But in my personal opinion, it is best enjoyed with a couple of friends or local multiplayer and the controller-free hand tracking turned on. And on number 9, we have Red Matter 2. This is also known by a lot of people as the most beautiful VR game that you can get on Quest 3, because every time I dive back into it again, I am shocked by the visual showcases that this headset is capable of. It is even so good looking that it is often on par, if not better, than a lot of PC VR games. But besides just the looks, the gameplay is focused on environmental puzzles and the occasional combat. And while some of these might not always perfectly hit the mark, it is thanks to the beautifully detailed environments that smooth out the occasional gameplay hiccups. But it really makes me wish that more games were pushing the quality to the same extent, because on the complete other side of the spectrum, we have number 10, which is Gorilla Tag. Since this is by far not known as the graphically most advanced game, it is one of the most popular VR games ever made, where you simply have to embody a gorilla in a big game of tag. And instead of your legs, you will be using your long arms to swing across the treetops and try to avoid being caught by the others. But above all, Gorilla Tag clearly showed the entire VR community that you don't need high quality graphics or an expensive game to make it to the top. And while it might not be for everybody, the influence it had on virtual reality can definitely not be understated. Which gets us to the unique game on number 11, known as Metamorphosis, which is probably unlike anything you have played so far inside VR, because the main protagonist, known as Gregor Samsa, has been transformed into a cockroach, meaning that you will now have to navigate through some surreal environments as you play from the perspective of being a tiny insect. And that also means that you will have to crawl and climb over objects like a bug yourself. Now, the overall gameplay has a narrative-driven story that is based on an original book by the same name, where you will soon find yourself not only trying to get back to your normal life, but also trying to save your friend while you're at it. But what I personally like about it most is that the game has multiple endings based on how you play it, which finally makes your choices have an influence over the story overall. And I wish that more VR games would implement this instead of a streamlined one-way approach. And on number 12, we have Population 1. This is often also known as the VR version of Fortnite, where matches take place on a huge map and where squads of 3 battle it out to the last one standing, making it a solid shooter with great VR mechanics for both climbing as well as flying across buildings. But that also means it can be quite an intense experience if you're prone to motion sickness. Either way, it is known as a competitive shooter that has crossplay support and is now also completely free to play, so you can finally jump in without paying a cent. And on number 13, we have Final Fury. This is a fighting game that comes from the creators of Synth Riders and set into a fast sci-fi universe. Final Fury drops you into an epic tournament where you will have to battle it out with some fearsome fighters. But it isn't just like any basic arcade game, because it is done in VR. Every move that you make will have a big impact. This goes from your punches to your blocks and even your special attacks. So when you choose your fighter, you're not just learning their moves, you also try to become that hero yourself and implement your own types of strategies, from rushing down your opponents to action cancelling or just dodging it all together, with the roster of unique fighters feeling really balanced but still very different from each other. These go from characters that can manipulate ice and snow to a self-aware robot that specializes in high-pressure bombs. But what hyped me up the most is that while you're trying to punch the living crap out of your opponent, they also put some adrenaline-pumping soundtracks into it, making you feel like a huge legend when you finally pull off your combos. And at number 14, we have Arizona Sunshine 2. This is a first-person shooter and a sequel that improves on the original in almost every way possible. And while the original title is now also getting a remake that is definitely worth your time, it is the second one that truly stole my heart, because the shooting mechanics have been so refined, as well as the addition of a new crafting system, but probably most importantly, there's Buddy, which is your canine companion and pretty much the star of this game. The cool thing is that he can actually help you distract zombies, as well as fetch items and help you with puzzle solving, making him a nice addition to the gameplay, as well as giving the player some emotional attachment, since he is a key component of the narrative as well. And at number 15, we have Pavlov Shag. This is for those hardcore gamers out there, because Pavlov Shag is not your run-of-the-mill game. Instead, it is known for having a community that is highly skilled and taking the game also very seriously. That being said, the game is quite easy to pick up, but very hard to master. But if you are a beginner when it comes to first-person shooters, then this might not be the best game to start with. However, if you're the one that likes a challenge, then you can't go wrong with Pavlov. And on number 16, we have 11 Table Tennis. This is another simple concept, yet amazingly executed when it comes to virtual reality, because 11 Table Tennis is just what the name implies, letting you play ping pong with people across the world, or just in simple one-on-one matches with bots. But why I am so addicted to this game is because of its ranking system that makes you want to get as high as possible within it. And while you might think or wonder how good it really translates to virtual reality, it is surprisingly so accurate that I sometimes forget that I'm not actually playing in real life. So to whoever worked on the physics, they sure did a damn great job. And on number 17, we have The Walking Dead Saint and Sinners. There's pretty much no denying that The Walking Dead Saint and Sinners is up there with one of the best campaign modes that is available on the Quest. And thanks to its big Quest 3 update, we can see an amazing graphic overhaul when it is compared to the Quest 2. Finally, adding in some dynamic shadows, as well as greater environmental details and additional zombies in open areas. But even before this update, Saint and Sinners is really setting the bar for VR zombie games. And while its sequel might not have been as good, I still definitely recommend it if you enjoyed the first one. And number 18, we have Walkabout Mini Golf. This is yet another perfect example of a real-life game that works even better inside virtual reality, because besides just being an accurate representation of the game itself, it goes way beyond what would normally be possible while staying authentic throughout it, and ticking all the boxes like plenty of courses, as well as an extensive multiplayer support, and above all, pinpoint physics that are arguably better than the real thing. But while there are also some awesome, amazing additional courses, these most of the time come in the form of paid DLC. So while these are often worth it, it is good to keep in mind that these can add up to quite a lot over time. And number 19 is Dungeons of Eternity, which I feel is often not talked about enough, because this is a fantasy action RPG that is perfect to play with a group of friends, where you will be using a variety of hack and slash combat options while clearing rooms in a true dungeon crawler style. And while it does have endless randomly generated dungeons, there is a very rewarding progression system that keeps you coming back for more. And even if you don't have any friends to play with, it is a solid title that keeps you on your toes when it comes to dungeon crawlers. And on number 20, we have Creed Rise to Glory. Imagine Punch-Out, but then in virtual reality, making you feel like an absolute badass while knocking out some fearsome foes. With the only complaint is that the gameplay can sometimes feel somewhat arcadey instead of being hyper realistic. But in case that is a problem for you, there are also some other options out there, like Thrill of the Fight, that make the boxing matches feel a bit more like real life. And while I enjoyed both, I think Creed Rise to Glory still holds up even after all these years. And on number 21, we have Unfold VR. This highly underrated app lets you very quickly create your own voxel 3D models and share them with the world, with all published drawings being instantly available for others to explore. Here, you can leave a like or maybe just remix it to make it your own. And with these super easy and intuitive drawing tools, it is pretty much as logical as possible to make your drawings from scratch. But by far, the biggest new feature is that they added in a multiplayer mode, where you can temporarily sketch with each other and with the brushstrokes being at random colors. And as a follow-up to that, there will also be a VR charades game mode, where a word will show up and someone has to draw it for the other ones to guess, making it so much more than just a basic drawing application. And on number 22, we have Beat Saber. There's no VR game list that wouldn't be complete without Beat Saber in it, because this is one of those VR games that had such a massive impact on virtual reality that for a lot of people even became the reason why they wanted a VR headset in the first place. And in the gameplay, you'll be smashing blocks on some amazing tunes. But what keeps people coming back to it is that the level can go from beginner to absolute god mode. But the only downside to it is that besides the included music packs, most of the additional songs come at a pretty hefty price tag. And while the game isn't that cheap to begin with, I kind of wish that sometimes a couple more songs were included. But overall, Beat Saber is a must play for anyone who owns a VR headset, and also one of the best experiences to get introduced into VR games. But if you want to take it up a level, then we have number 23, which is Ghost of Tabor. This is a hardcore tactical shooter in its own right, with the VR mechanism leaning heavily towards realism. That means you can expect manual reloads as well as low damage thresholds for players. And the tense danger of getting out with all your gear versus risking it all for more loot is compelling as ever, making it perfect for people who also love games like the previously mentioned Pavlov Shag. And on number 24, we have Bone Lab. This is made by the same people behind the game called Boneworks for PC VR, and was probably one of the most hyped VR games of all time, with its main focus being on its realistic physics system that has been fully improved and polished to work on the Quest headsets. And with the combat of using ranged and melee weapons, as well as switching between a lot of characters on the fly, makes the gameplay super engaging and different every time you play it. But its biggest pro is probably the mods, because thanks to those, you can even play the entire Boneworks games inside of it as well. But while for some people this is their absolute favorite VR game of all time, there were also quite a lot of users who were slightly disappointed with the length of the story. So if you're looking for a very long campaign mode, then this might not be it. However, if you love to mess around in one of the best sandbox VR games that includes arenas to obstacle courses, as well as a bunch of experimental modes and generated levels, then there's almost nothing better out there. And on number 25, we have Blast On. This is a fast-paced PvP VR shooter where your survival hinges on one simple rule, is never stay still. Here, players will brawl it out against each other in a slow motion bullet hell where you collect weapons and personalize your loadout, but you will have to move your entire body to dodge the oncoming fires. Best of all, this game is now completely free to play, so that everyone can get in on the action and take aim on the competition. And on number 26, we have Broken Edge. You can probably directly tell that this game has a very unique art style, but besides that, it kind of plays like a fantasy sword dueling game, similar to something like For Honor, where you will have to embody historical sword fighters, with each their unique techniques and powers combined with some cutting-edge fencing mechanics. And since each character has their own distinctive martial art style, learning to master each of them and the patterns is the key to actually win your fights. And while it might not look complicated or deep at first, it can become super addictive quickly. And on number 27, we have I Expect You to Die. This is a trilogy of games that puts you into the well-polished shoes of an elite secret agent, where the agency is expecting you to escape each of the 7 missions that you are confronted with. That basically means that you will constantly be solving puzzles while trying to survive some deadly situations. But you will probably die a couple of times before you manage to finish them, making it overall a great trilogy that I think everybody should have experienced once. Number 28, In Death Unchained. This is a fully archery-focused game, where you will be battling through a floating castle of medieval fantasy while raining down some arrows against some forsaken souls and angelic creatures or everything in between. And even though it got some big enhancements for Quest 3, I feel like a lot of new people have sadly completely missed this game. And on number 29, we have Pistol Whip. This is a VR rhythm shooting game that makes you feel like you're John Wick inside the Matrix, because not only will you see beautifully flashing colors everywhere, this is one of the most stylish arcade rhythm VR games that you can probably get anywhere, with its sharp shooting beat-based gameplay that sometimes looks even more hypnotic than Beat Saber. But while you're trying to blast off your enemies, you also have to avoid incoming fire and try to rank up the best score by shooting on the beat, almost making you feel like you're John Wick inside the Matrix while on a big visual trip. But it is also such a great game thanks to the continuous support from its developers that added in more content, a lot of features, and extra tracks. But that gets us to number 30, which is VR chat. This is probably the most important important game on this entire list, because VRChat is one of the games that started my passion for virtual reality in the first place. And I'm sure that besides me, the same goes for many others, because in here you can create your own avatars and entire worlds, as well as visit those creations from your friends, making it feel very similar to something like the Oasis from Ready Player One. But the potential here is absolutely limitless, from full-blown games to concerts, or even hangout spots to meet new people. If you can imagine something, then there most likely is already a VR chat world for it. And if not, then why not just create it yourself? And that is exactly why VR chat is one of the most influential and important games on this entire list. But that's not all, because there are also some other big hidden gem VR games that you probably don't know about. So click on the video that you see on screen right now to make sure you don't miss out. And of course, stay awesome.